Because all over the world, since the United States now is not the leader of together, but the leader of separatism, a word that I have to go back and look to see what the meaning of, because I'm not sure. What does separatism mean? What does isolation mean in a world where we are together not because by choice? And I live in a city where I look out of my window every day and see a statue in the waters that says, "Give me your tithe, you're hungry, you're poor." And we are saying, no, you die at sea, or you die at the border, or die in the desert. I don't care where, but don't come. Don't come. It's the opposite of together.
Doesn't sound American to me. Doesn't sound what we represent.
And I come from a group of people that didn't come by choice. But if I had to leave today, as my Nigerian brothers and sisters are fleeing, I can't even imagine my own country taking my child out of my arms and telling me, you're not allowed. You can't enter my country.
Oh, the Jesus way.
Oh, the Jesus way
Is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way.
Oh, the Jesus way
Is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. When He is King, all wars will cease. May His peace begin with me.
The Brooklyn First Church of the Brethren is located about 9 miles, or roughly 20 minutes, from the headquarters of the United Nations, located at 405 First Avenue, New York, New York. For our special guest, it's a trip that Doris Abdullah has made many times, as she is the United Nations representative for the Church of the Brethren. Hello, I'm Brent Carlson. Welcome to Brethren Voices. Many brethren may not know that the Church of the Brethren had involvement in the United Nations, and probably very few people knew that a small church denomination could have representation to the world's Organization of Nations. Our January 2009 program featured Peggy Reiff Miller and the Seagoing Cowboys of the Church of the Brethren's Heifer project, which sent livestock to Europe following World War II. This was a coordinated effort of the Church of the Brethren's Service Committee and the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, which sent shipments of livestock to Europe following World War II. This was a coordinated effort of the Brethren Service Committee and the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. Over a period of years, 73 ships carrying 7,000 seagoing cowboys who were carrying and accompanying thousands of cows, horses, sheep, and chickens and other animals, you name it, to repopulate the devastated farms of Europe. And that was a big thing in the eyes of the world. And according to Doris Abdullah, the Church of the Brethren has been a member of the United Nations when there were just 51 countries that made up the world's Organization of Nations. According to Doris, in order to become a member nation of the United Nations, all countries have to ratify you to be a member. We were mighty fortunate to meet with Doris Abdullah at the Church of the Brethren's annual conference in Cincinnati, Ohio. We asked her if she's always been involved in the Church of the Brethren.
No, as most African Americans, I come from the Southern Baptist tradition. My family, both sides, my mother and my father were Baptists. My family comes from Virginia, also both sides, the Chesapeake Bay area of Virginia. My mother was a very curious person, and as a girl growing up, she always wanted to live in New York. And she said at night she would take her radio and be under her covers and listening to stations on the radio about New York.
Wow.
And she also belonged to the New York Times Book Club. So she used to get these books from New York. And so that's how my parents ended up in New York. So I grew up mostly in Manhattan. And then in 1969, I married and I moved to Brooklyn. Matter of fact, my mother said to my then fiance, "You're taking my daughter to Brooklyn? We don't know anyone in Brooklyn." And
It's a mile away.
yes, you would have thought it was Virginia already. But and I had been to Brooklyn maybe 2 times, and both times to Coney Island. But I have lived there now since 1969.
Wow.
And,
So you really are a New Yorker, and what do people from Brooklyn call themselves?
Brooklynites. We are Brooklynites. But now Brooklyn is the newest thing because there really is no more space in Manhattan. And so Brooklyn is almost as crowded as Manhattan. That is the city streets. We do have millions of people, of course, as you know.
So you're married, and do you have kids?
I have one son. He's 33. My husband is deceased. He died in 2001. My husband came from North Africa. His family, they were Egyptians who lived in Trinidad, Tobago, and United States.
How did you discover the Church of the Brethren?
Through my son. He needed a babysitter, and we knew a lady from El Salvador who had been his previous babysitter, and she suggested, when she could no longer do the job, a lady that had been with her in her home country of El Salvador. But she said to me, she doesn't speak any English. And I said, that's fine, because at the time he was 4 years old, but he was at the Lutheran elementary school, and they had already started language. When I called up for the interview, it was answered by this man who said, "This is Phil Carlos Archibald, Church of the Brethren." And I said, "Church of the Brethren? What does that have to do with this lady I'm calling here?" But I went.
Did he speak English?
Yes.
He said that in English.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And he was moderator of Church of the Brethren some years later, after this. But Church of the Brethren in Brooklyn has been there since 1908. And we have sponsored people from El Salvador prior to the what's happening right now. I should say prior to 2000s.
Brethren in Brooklyn, New York, and numerous other Church of the Brethren's congregations have a history of working with and helping desperate migrants and refugees. We asked Doris to tell us about the Brooklyn congregation and their outreach in the community.
Brooklyn First Church of the Brethren is a mission church, and we always have people passing through. When I came there, the congregation was predominantly Italian. They had been Catholics that had gone to Protestantism, and the other group of people came from Palestine, and they were Arab Christians. So and various parts of Central and South America, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and the top of South America, Ecuador. And so the scripture each Sunday morning is read was read in the 3 languages, which was Arabic, Spanish, and English, because the Italian people spoke English. that was when I came there.
So it's really a mingling of people.
Yes, and it's always been that way, and that was the intentions. I don't know if it was to be this broad as it is now. Today, the Arabic congregation is now in Staten Island because they grew to such a full extent that they needed their own facilities.
So there's a Church of the Brethren in Staten Island?
Yes, it's called Light of the Gospel.
Wow. Sounds like you're a wonderful fit to be a United Nations representative for the Church of the Brethren, because you live in the world of many cultures.
Yes, that's it. We know that the Lord said, "I knew you before you were knitted in your mother's womb," and so the journey that I have been on has always been enmeshed in many cultures, many different people coming from many different places in the world, and I love it all.
So your babysitter ends up being for your son ends up being from the Church of the Brethren, and then how did you get connected to go to church, and when did you join?
Because he only wanted to go on Sundays to where Rosario was, and Rosario was his babysitter.
So your son wanted to go to church?
Yes.
Oh.
So
he drug his mother along?
So of course, mommy have to take him where he's happy, right? Because he's very young. So at 5, by the time he was 5, this in a kindergartner, every Sunday now, I found myself at Church of the Brethren rather than at a Baptist church, well, which was Convent Avenue Baptist Church in Manhattan. If you ever heard of Dr. Carlos Archibald, he is a very persuasive person.
So you started going to the Church of the Brethren, and at some point in time,
because of that, yes.
you decided you wanted to be
I decided that, or God decided that this is my church.
Okay.
And
when was that?
I was a deacon. The years fly by so fast. It was the early 90s.
Okay.
It was the early 90s. The exact date, everything is important in your life. So as I've grown older.
More than 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah, much more than 20 years ago. And my son is Paul, and he was baptized when he was 15 there. And by that time, I was a deacon within the church.
Oh, right. Being a representative of the Church of the Brethren in the United Nations is an amazing responsibility, and it was an honor to be able to meet with Doris Abdullah. We asked her to tell us about taking that position.
To make a long story short, Sister Bernadette invited me to go with her for the 2-week conference on racism at the UN. Now, as a New Yorker, we have, and as a child, you have gone to the UN for big events. So I said to her, they'll only give me a 1 day, I'm sure. And she said, she considered me a Mennonite. She knew about
the Mennonites.
And she knew about Quakers, but Brethren didn't register for her. So she said, I'm sure, because I've seen other Mennonites there, that you can get also a two-week pass. And sure enough, when I gave my name and which NGO I belonged to, Church of the Brethren, they said, here, and it was a 2-week pass.
So the Church of the Brethren is an official member of the Church of the United Nations?
Yes. They are an NGO that's registered at the church at the UN as in the Department of Public Information, or what we say DPI. We love the alphabet soup.
Yeah.
The Department of Public Information.
Well, a lot of people, I didn't know that at all, but I do know that even individuals can be members of the United Nations.
Yes.
Individual people.
Yes, yes. But all 193 countries have to vote for you.
Really?
Yes, but when the when Church of the Brethren went, it was only 51 countries.
So we've been there a long time.
We've been there a long
Oh,
time.
amazing. Okay.
And so I volunteered myself to
You went to the 2-week?
I went to the 2 weeks a conference on racism, which is a 1965 treaty, the first treaty of the UN and its members states to eliminate racism
In the world.
in the world. Of course, this treaty was the first because all the war that had previously initiated the UN in the beginning was based on this conflict of and misunderstanding.
Religion and race. Yeah.
Yes, but it's racism, racial discrimination. It's actually a holiday at the UN. It's March 21st.
So you went to the 2-week conference. You found out the Church of Brethren was already a member.
Yes.
Registered.
So then I called Elgin and I said, well, you have a seat at the table,
But nobody's in it.
but nobody's at the table. But we did have a representative, but the representative was at the University of Chicago, and so of course he was not able to come to New York, which is, most of the meetings. New York is the headquarters.
Yeah.
Geneva is human rights, and Netherlands is the Court of Justice, and he was not able to attend. I, on the other hand, live in Brooklyn, New York, and can go as often as I want to, and I try to attend at least once every week.
Really? Oh my goodness.
And if there are conferences, as there are always, the racism conference, but all the treaties, they have to have these conferences continuously. So they are annual conferences on racism. The large one was in South Africa, which was the Durban. Out of that came, again, on racism, out of that came the Durban Declaration, again, to reiterate that we are going to eliminate racism and racial discrimination, xenophobia, and all related intolerance. It's a big.
That's a big.
It's broad.
That's a
it's
broad
big.
job, and a
But
wonderful
193 countries have signed on to this. But we, the people, have to be the ones to move these agendas.
The Together program is a United Nations initiative, and Doris expressed many concerns about the plights of migrants and refugees and this country's policy of separating children from their parents.
Together is a global initiative that promotes respect, promotes safety and dignity for everyone forced to flee their homes in search of a better life. That's where you find the Together initiative that was launched in 2016 to bring not order, but more clarification on the plight of migrants and refugees. And again, together meaning the nations of the world, civil society, and all the institutions, because we can't do it just by one nation, or we can't do it just by the governments. We need everyone to be a part. If you're not, you have to be whole.
You've written in the Messenger about the Together initiative.
Yes.
And I know you've actually written some other things about Togetherness. Can you kind of give us just a broad background of what it was originally and then what it's become?
Well, I was just giddy in 2017 when I wrote the original. We had just had our election, but I had no idea that it would be where we are today. But I was just so happy about it, and I was calling
Not
the
about
attention.
the election, but about the initiative.
Yeah, about the initiative. Definitely the initiative is the only thing that was on my brain at the time. And I wanted to let the Church of the Brethren know that this initiative had been launched at the UN. But at the same time, we had had the election, and now we had had the inauguration, and this ban was just one night, one Saturday
Suddenly
night.
appeared.
Yes, and it's not together at all. It's just the opposite. It's separation, not together.
So 2 years ago, there was a recognition
Yes.
in the United Nations that this is a problem that's becoming a bigger problem.
Yes.
And we want to do something about it.
Yes, we want to stop it now,
Stop
right?
it now as a world responding to migrant and refugee problems.
Yes, yes.
Wasn't there some idea that the United States was going to be a leader in this initiative?
Yes, because of the experience with at the UN with President Obama, the prior president, it was just automatically assumed that the United States would be the leader of this new Together initiative. You must remember at the same time it was climate change, it was all these new things being launched because we recognized how small the world was, and we had new problems. They were based on non-state actors such as Daesh, such as Boko Haram, all of these things, but that was nothing in comparison to vast armies that had preceded and made big wars. So we could together, now that we don't have these vast armies
And global warfare.
Yes,
So
we can
let's do
do
something
these
else.
things. We can solve these problems of people fleeing their homes because of famine, or fleeing their homes because of conflicts within tribes or ethnic groups. We have time on our hands, shall we say?
Yeah, time and energy.
Yeah, and
maybe some money,
the
resources.
spark and resources, and who would have thought that everything would change?
But also, it sounds like there was a recognition that these problems affect everybody. It's not just
Always.
It's not just this isolated country or these isolated people. What's happening is affecting everyone,
Yes,
and we
yes.
need to respond to it
as
as a global initiative.
Right. Yes. You can't respond singly. You can't be a silo. If a child, if Syria is having problems, Jordan is having problems too, and so is Lebanon, but so is Italy, so is the
Greece and
United
Turkey
States,
yeah.
and so is China. So because people have to, if they have to flee, they have to go someplace.
Yeah, it's true, and it's happened. So where are we today with the Together initiative? What's
Now the Together initiative is stalled because all over the world, since the United States now is not the leader of Together, but the leader of separatism. A word that I have to go back and look to see what the meaning of, because I'm not sure. What does separatism mean? What does isolation mean in a world where we are together not by choice? And I live in a city where I look out of my window every day and see a statue in the waters that says, "Give me your tithe, you're hungry, you're poor." And we are saying, no, you die at sea, or you die at the border, or die in the desert. I don't care where, but don't come. Don't come. It's the opposite of Together.
doesn't sound American to me. Doesn't sound what we represent.
And
as a
I
country.
come from a group of people that didn't come by choice. But if I had to leave today, as my Nigerian brothers and sisters are fleeing, and I can't even imagine my own country taking my child out of my arms and telling me, you're not allowed. You can't enter my country. Stay on your boat.
Stay on your boat. And now we have a
stay on your
situation
boat.
where we're going to take your kids, we're going to send you over here, and we're not sure when your kids are going to get back.
We don't even care about that. No dignity, no respect, just the opposite of together. I don't know if we have words. I had not thought about any words for that.
Inconceivable, isn't it? That
Yes,
this could happen.
yes. I didn't want to use that word, inconceivable, because our imagination should be able to conceive anything, regardless to how horrible it is, because evil does exist. The monsters are real. The monsters are not just a cartoon.
The Brooklyn First Church of the Brethren has continued in a 108-year tradition of welcoming others. The late Phil Carlos Archbold, who had served as its pastor and as annual conference moderator, was himself a migrant from Panama and an active promoter of migrant and refugee causes. Most of the people who cross through the Brooklyn First Church doors each Sunday come from someplace outside the United States. Recently, a young man from El Salvador walked through their doors after being released from a Texas detention center. He had to flee for his life as El Salvador gangs had ordered his death. Violence, conflict, and war are the leading causes for those who flee their homes and become displaced persons or refugees. This young man was offered a place at the congregation's table of praise and worship, along with all the others. Doris states, it's going to be more difficult to keep our eyes fixed on Scripture and biblically focused as we drift further away from the world of reality towards politics and conflict on TV as entertainment. However, like Paul, she says, I am convinced that nothing in all creation will ever be able to separate me from the love of Jesus Christ our Lord. I will fight on and pray that you are there by my side. This is Brent Carlson for Brethren Voices, wishing you peace.
All those who tread the path he trod, all those who tread the path he trod, all those who tread the path he trod shall be called the friends of God. May his peace begin with me. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace.